to listen to another one of our Mississippi-made exhibits. And so this one is about Mississippi-made Stennis Space Center. And so Tom Rich is going to give us an exhibit, a presentation about 65 years of NASA's Stennis Space Center. And so it's going to explore a rich history and technological milestones that develop how the road to deep space undeniably runs through the state of Mississippi. And afterwards we will have a Q&A. A little bit about Thomas Rich. He's the Deputy Director of the Center Operations Directorate. And so you guys will be here, and so he'll get his presentation, and I'll have a Q&A after. And so you guys will listen. All right? Thank you.
Thank y'all very much. Appreciate y'all being here today. And again, like she said, I'm going to try to do this usually different. I usually try to take the questions as we go so people don't forget them, but I'm going to try to get through this, and then we'll take the questions at the end if you don't mind. So, 65 years of Stennis Space Center. So, does everybody know where Stennis Space Center is?
NASA.
It's NASA. Do you know it's in Mississippi?
I don't know that.
All right. So, well, welcome. Welcome to Stennis Space Center. It's in Mississippi. And without Mississippi, we wouldn't be getting to the moon. We wouldn't be getting to space. I'm going to give you a little journey on that, try to show you where Mississippi is so important into our space program. So, 65 years ago, we're going to roll back. I'm going to go back even further. So back in Dwight David Eisenhower's administration, on October 1st, 1958, NASA was born. It came out of NACA, which came out before that, which was more about airplanes. When NASA came about in October 1st, 1968, we started talking about space. You roll forward a few years and you can see this. So look at the date down here at the bottom, May 25th, 1961. Just want to give you some context to that. On May 5th, 1961, that's the first time we sent Americans into space. Alan Shepard went up for 15 minutes and went into space for the first time for Americans. It was about 2 weeks after the Russians had done it with Yuri Gagarin. So we were rushing to try to get there. So you can see the words that Kennedy put up here, and this is before Congress, that he went and he said these things. And then he repeated them again later on in the year at Rice University. And I was watching a little bit earlier, if you get the opportunity after the speech, there's a video that plays over here and you can see that speech. And we'll have a little clip of that speech in a little bit. But he came and he said, before the end of the decade, we're going to be on the moon. We had been in space 15 minutes. Okay? And then he's making the bold statement that before the end of the decade, we're going to be on the moon. Huge. Well, we weren't going to get there if it wasn't for Mississippi. So if you take and you look at where Stennis Space Center is located, it's located down towards the mouth of the Pearl River. So right just on the border between Mississippi and Louisiana. And so kind of think about that geography of the coast down there with the Gulf. And one of the first things that was named, because we're older than Kennedy Space Center, and we were talking about Cocoa Beach and everything a minute ago, we're older than Kennedy Space Center, so they hadn't even thought about where they're going to launch yet, but they had an idea of it. They just knew that they needed a few different things, large and sparsely populated. Well, y'all are all from Mississippi. You've ridden through some of the woods. You know that there's a lot of sparsely populated stuff. This is a farming community, farming state. There's a lot of stuff, logging state, and that's what was down in that area, right down by the mouth of the river. Needed access to waterways. Well, it's on the mouth of the Pearl River. So you could get out of the Pearl, you could get into the Lake Pontchartrain, you could get into the Gulf of Mexico, you could get around the world. Most of the rocket engines and everything else were being built over in California. That was the place where a lot of aerospace took place, and so they were building it in California. But they knew that they weren't going to be able to launch there to be able to get and do the different missions that they needed to do of getting to the moon, getting to the right portions of space. And so that has a lot to do with geography, You usually want to get closer to the equator to be able to launch and be able to get higher, but we don't need to get into that today because we're talking about Mississippi and how Mississippi is a great state for space exploration. And so when we get down inside of it, we're looking at a few more things. Obviously, and we have a lady in the audience that's seen a rocket engine launch or watch a rocket launch. It's very loud. Lots of power is involved in this. So you need a lot of room, and you don't want people real close by because people don't like noise a whole lot. They usually complain about that a little bit. So we need some buffer zones inside of there. And then you needed somebody who was a great person like John C. Stennis that would come forward and step up for the nation. All that happened back on October 25th, 1961, when they signed the order that Stennis Space Center is going to exist. And it was at that time that John Stennis had to go down to the 5 communities that existed where Stennis Space Center is now and try to talk to these people and convince them that for the greater good of the nation, we need your land and we're going to build this space testing complex. And those 5 towns should never be forgotten. We got Logtown, Gainesville, Napoleon, Westovia, and Santa Rosa are the 5 towns that those families gave up their land to be able to have Stennis Space Center. Now, let's move a little bit. This is where John C. Stennis came in. And this was one of his big things, and this is always the truth in life. You have to have a few thorns before you can get the flowers. And that's what it was all about, is there is so much greatness that happened during the 60s and still continues down there today at Stennis Space Center that helped us get to the moon, had the shuttle missions, and then now we have the SLS that's going to get us back to the moon. This is a great picture. I love this picture. And there's so many more like it that you can go and see. But this is May 17th, 1963. They cut the first tree down at Stennis Space Center. That's when they started the construction, by cutting all the trees down. Again, y'all are in Mississippi, so you know there's a lot of pine trees. You can kind of see them all in the background right there. When they came in, and we'll see a picture in just a minute of when they were building one of these test stands, they went and they clear-cut the site, cut all those trees down, because they didn't really know what they were getting into. It was a blank slate. That's what they wanted. They wanted a blank slate to be able to go and do work because they needed to build a city. And so I'm going to give you another date inside of here as we move forward with this test stand. This test stand is the A2 test stand, and it's got a huge, huge history and a huge significance to it. But if you take and you look at that site right there, you can see the excavation that happened. And I will direct you to kind of look around the outside, and you see there's no trees there. There were a bunch of trees there, because if you go back now, there's plenty of trees back again. But they clear-cut the site, and then they had to dig down. If you've been out in South Mississippi, it's a swamp. They're digging down into a swamp, and they put basements down there. Amazing stuff to think about basements in South Mississippi, but we have basements down there. They had to drive piles because they didn't want this thing to just sink into the dirt. So if you see that stand, and that is a stand that is just like this stand that's being built right here. It is as tall as it is deep, because they had to drive those piles in so that it would not go down. And so they took and they built that stand, and if you look at it from about halfway down is concrete until it gets all the way down into the ground. And they built that thing in less than 3 years, and we're testing on it. It's, to me, and I have an engineering background, we don't build anything in 3 years anymore. But when you take and you think about what NASA had at that point, and you saw what Kennedy said, we were full force forward. At that point, and so to kind of give you some clarity on what things were happening, 4.5% of the national budget was going to NASA. Right now, it's 0.1%. And we still do some amazing stuff, but 4.5%. There was a goal, and they went after that goal. One of the things I'll point out in this picture here is if you take and you look at that black ring that's in there, we had some geologists and other things come in, and they believe, well, they know it was a riverbed, but they believe that that was the course of the Mississippi before it changed courses to where it is now. So they think that the Mississippi went right through South Mississippi at the time. Dumped all of its alluvial sand, and then left it here for us to be able to test on. I think that's amazing, but that's just one of the coolest things I think is out there. That's a look at what the test, what a test looks like. I don't know if it's necessarily the test, but you can kind of see inside of here is that the Saturn II second stage was tested on April 23rd, 1963. And so, again, that's an amazing thing to me, that from May 17th, 1963 to April 23rd, 1966, they built that stand and they tested on it for the first time. Less than 3 years. And every time I say that to myself, I'm amazed by the whole thing. But it's what our nation can do when they put themselves forward and pull a goal. And the people who built this, just to kind of keep re-emphasizing it, are Mississippians. They were the ones who came in and did it and made it happen. So I'm going to get back a little bit to the geography of things. So if you take, again, look at the mouth of the Mississippi. If you know a little bit, you have Johnson, which is the control center, which is in Houston. You have Kennedy, which is on the other side of Florida, which is where we launch. And then now you take and you put the Gulf in there. They used to call it the Space Crescent. And we still do, but it was a more popular term back then because it was the crescent of where everything was being built at the time and where everything was happening. We would launch it out of Kennedy. They would control it out of Houston. Then to kind of throw Alabama into play, Alabama has Marshall Space Flight Center, which is up in Houston, in Huntsville, and that is where they designed everything. What is a very cool thing about having Marshall up there is that everything is connected down through waterways. You can get from the Tennessee River over to the Mississippi River down to Stennis Space Center. You can get to Houston. You can get over to Kennedy. But everything is connected by waterways, and that was the way it was designed back in the day with Werner von Braun and John C. Stennis, that they planned all this to be able to be worked out that way. Now again, let's talk about a few things that work. So here's the nice launch that happened in 1969. If we go forward, John Stennis had the idea that, okay, we have this beautiful space center. Well, we were talking about it before. From 1969 to 1972 is when we landed on the moon. Those 4 years, 3.5. And then we called it quits. At Stennis Space Center, we had probably 3,000 to 4,000 people that worked there in the 60s. It had went down to all the way down to 200 people. 200 people working out there. John Stennis was like, what are we going to do with this beautiful facility and move forward with it? And it was at that point, and you can kind of see some of the things that he was talking about, he started getting together. There's a picture of Richard Nixon, and you can kind of see the model that is sitting right there on him, and that kind of looks like a shuttle, right? If you know what the shuttle looks like. So they were starting to move forward. They were starting to think about what the next big thing was, and they were moving forward. Now it came to diversification inside of Stennis Space Center. So from 1968 is when we tested the last stage. There were 27 stages that were tested at Stennis Space Center to be able to go send people to the moon. And then it ended in 1968. They kind of kept things going until the end of the space program a little bit, to kind of, if need be, you can pull it back in and test it if you have to. And those are things that we still do today with engines. But they needed to figure out something better to do for this place, which I failed to even kind of give you some ideas of the size of this place. So let me go back and give you those ideas, is that when you take and you look at Stennis Space Center itself, just the gates of Stennis Space Center, it's 13,800 acres. I'll give you a comparison, because who knows what 13,800 acres looks like. But if you think about the island of Manhattan, New York City, it's 14,200 acres. So this island of Manhattan is just a little bit bigger than Stennis Space Center. So now let's talk about the rest of it. We talked about noise and everything else. So Congress went out and made an easement around Stennis Space Center that you can't build in. That's 125,000 acres. So now we're up to about 140,000 acres. Well, what does that mean? That's 3.5 Washington D.C.s. Just to kind of put something in context for you. That's big. It's huge. And that's what we have to maintain nowadays. So you have this great thing that has this big acoustical buffer zone around it, which is just it's a national asset, if nothing else. Well, what are you going to do with it? And then that's, in these days, in 68 to 75, that's when smart people started sitting down and figuring out what can we do next. And so that's when the diversification came in. There was a thought back then that if we had federal entities that needed space, lab space, any other space, why don't they come and get together? Why don't these agencies, hey, I got to build this thing over here and I got to maintain it and I got to do all these other things. Why don't we do it together so that we can maintain it together? We can share property, we can share principles, and be able to keep economically together. And it'd be cheaper for everybody, it'd be cheaper for our taxes. Well, that's what started happening. So in 1970, we had the U.S. Coast Guard come in, and at the time they had, it's changed a few times, but at the time it was the U.S. Coast Guard. They came in with the National Data Buoy Center. So if anybody in here likes to go offshore fishing and they go check those buoys and everything, those buoys originated at Stennis Space Center. But that was because some people thought back in the 1970s going, we have access to waterways, we have a lot of land, why don't we marry those two together? And they went and they did it. And it was a brilliant thing that they went and did. But that happened in 1970. A little bit later on that year, NASA decided to take and move an Earth Sciences ability to Stennis Space Center. They moved it from Johnson in Houston over to Stennis Space Center. So we started building more and more stuff. 1975 rolls around, the Navy moves in. NAVOceano came down there, and NAVOceano is a group that takes and they look at all the weather patterns and all the ocean currents around the world, and then they let their whole fleet forces and all of the military know what's going on around the world weather-wise. They came down to Stennis Space Center in 1975. So it was starting to grow, and it was starting to build, and it was starting to do a lot of different things. But in the meantime, and you saw that model of the shuttle, they decided that they were going to test the shuttle engine, space shuttle main engine, at Stennis Space Center. And so as we move a little bit further on, we can see that the space shuttle main engine tested at Stennis Space Center for the first time in May of 1975. And that picture right there that you see in the lower left-hand corner is that test stand right there. That's the A1 test stand, which is called the Fred Hayes test stand now. And we'll talk about Fred Hayes in a second. Now, the final engine test for the Space Shuttle main engine happened in July of 2009. And if you know anything about the shuttle program, you know the shuttle program ended in 2011 with the last flight of the Artemis. So you can you see the 2-year difference there. Well, that stand had to stay active for the next 2 years in case there was an incident that we had to go and test the engines. Well, I can tell you, 135 shuttle flights, not one engine incident. None. Something to be very proud of, that we didn't have any. Now, these stands are, again, national assets. This stand is named for Fred Hayes. Fred Hayes is a great Mississippian. Apollo 13, that medal right there has his face embossed on it. He's from Biloxi, one of the nicest guys you ever met in your life. Truly, truly a great man.
He's still alive, isn't he?
He is. He lives in Arizona because the climbs do him better there. He's 93, 94 years old. Opportunity, if you've never seen it, watch Apollo 13. I can't remember which actor played his part right now, it's just escaping me, but truly, truly a good movie and a great man. So when we're sitting here, we're talking about the shuttle engine testing, now we needed to move on to the new things. The new engine is the same engine, just beefed up a little bit more. So the engine was always called the RS-25. Just during the shuttle days, we called it SSME for Shuttle Main Engine, because that's what it ran on. Now we're back to calling it the RS-25, but it's in like Series E right now. That's E as an echo. So they built different series. They've increased the thrust potential in that engine each time that they do it. So that's what we have on our latest engine that launched in April and brought the astronauts around the moon this last time. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about John C. Stennis. We talked a little bit about the Navy. He was the one, in the positions that he held in Congress, he was a very, very powerful man in Congress, and he was very great for the state of Mississippi. He brought Stennis Space Center down to Mississippi. You can see, if you're familiar with it, there's an aircraft carrier that's named for John C. Stennis. That was because he loved the military and he loved NASA. And it showed by what he did. And as a retirement gift, you can see this picture, they renamed the center for him. Because before that, it was called the National Testing Laboratory Center, the NSTO, Space Laboratory, National Testing Space Laboratory, I'm sorry. It changed in '75 and I forgot about it. So this was actually in 1988 when it became John C. Stennis Space Center, May 20th, 1988. And he retired later that year from the Senate, but Ronald Reagan signed an executive order to make this effective. Now we move, like I'm saying, into the RS-25. This is the age that we're in now. Now, I'm kind of burying the lead a little bit in the fact that this stand has now tested for 3 generations of NASA missions. It was built 65 years ago. How robust and how forward-thinking were those engineers at the time to build something like this that we're still using it today? Amazing, amazing stuff. So now, we talk about, and so I was talking a little earlier, this is a picture of another one of the stands. We don't have a model of that here. This is the B stand. And this is the stand where we tested the core stage back in 2021. That right there in that left-hand picture, you can see is the rocket body. It has 4 engines on the bottom of that. 4 of those Space Shuttle main engines, or RS-25 engines. And then they tested that. I was lucky enough to be able to be out there that day, because if you remember, there was a lot of stuff going on in 2021 called COVID. And so we were still social distancing and we were doing a lot of different things. So we weren't able to bring people out on site to see that. We were very hopeful that we were going to be able to bring people out on site to see this, because this is an amazing thing. But I want to tell you, if you take and you look at this background right there, that nice blue background, there was not a cloud in the sky that day. It was beautiful. And it was a perfect test.
But it still rained after the test, didn't it?
So yes.
Are you going to tell people, or are you going to keep that a secret?
No, it is not a secret. And thank you for that. So the fuels that we use on the rocket are liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And if you're familiar with what water's made out of, it's made out of hydrogen and oxygen. So when you see that big cloud that's coming out the back end of the test stand right there, all that is steam. That goes up, we make a big cloud, and as it condensates, as it gets a whole lot of water built up in this thing, it rains. And I thank you for that, because one of the best things that happened that day is that we had a beautiful rainbow over the top of the stand.
But the rest of the story, as I understand it, all the insiders know that the test is over to immediately leave the grandstands. Everybody else there first time, you're going to stay in the grandstands, all caught up in the rapture and awe of it, and suddenly it rains on them in the grandstands.
Yes, he acts like he's been there before. So one of the things to just kind of tell you, so another insider view of that is the water that we use to be able to cool that comes out of a canal system, a 7.5-mile canal system, and there's fish that live in that canal system. And then there's a big reservoir, there's a 66 million gallon reservoir that we have 10 pumps that are hooked up to, that pump 300,000 gallons of water per minute. Let that sink in a little bit. Let me say it again. 300,000 gallons of water per minute, 60 seconds.
So the water comes from what, the river?
It comes out of the river, and we have a canal system, so it comes right out of the Pearl River system. So we'll talk, you asked, so I'm going to tell. And so there is a 7.5-mile canal system that was built. It has a lock system that's built into it that's the same specifications as the Panama Canal. So the reason for that is, if you remember from before, I was telling you that all this stuff was built in California. So it needed to get to us. And so it got to us through the Panama Canal. Well, we knew if we built it to the specifications, it could get into the canal. Okay, and the reason for the canal is we need to make sure that the canal level stays the same all the time, because we have barges and they hook up to the stands, and if that level moved with the tides, we wouldn't be able to test. So we put a canal system in, and the canal doesn't have tide system. The river does. And so that's one of the reasons for it, but it's also a whole lot easier to have this built at the 25-foot level, elevation-wise, and then the river being at sea level, and then now you don't have to go as deep to be able to have the same river level, if that makes sense. Okay.
So it's like close to the river, like both of them is like connected to each other?
Yes, and so a lock system, the way the lock system works is it's an elevator. Okay, so it pumps water in, and so this is at level 18, this is at level 0. They bring the barge in, they pump water underneath it.
Pumping the water out and the steam coming out.
Well, the stand stays still, the water level rises, and then they get in the canal that's at this level. So it's like an elevator for ships.
Up and down.
Yep. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's cool.
Lots of smart people. It's very cool. So yes, so the canal system's in there, the water's in there, but to add into what the rain smells like, it smells like fish. So you don't want to be rained on. So insider view, don't get rained on. And Eric can tell you about that. All right, this will give you a bigger view. And so I'm going to move over a little bit so I can point. I'm going to put my glasses on. You see all that? Right there is that stand right there. That's its twin right there. So A1, A2. B stand is the one that you saw in the last picture. This is a new one. We built this to kind of talk about a few different things. We built that for Constellation. And Constellation was one that we had for, after they canceled the shuttle program. And then when Obama came in, he moved it to be SLS. So we built this stand, and this stand was supposed to be a vacuum chamber testing stand. We didn't quite get there with that, but it's still a great national asset. because there is not a single stand like that in the world. That's the only one that they got. And then this is the E-complex down here. This is our, if you want to look at it and kind of think about it, it's like R&D testing, research and development. You kind of think of something up, start testing ideas about it, and then you bring it over to this big side over here, and that's when you put it all together and test it as a big engine. Again, lots of smart people. 65 years old, and this is just amazing. You wouldn't believe the amount of work that's happening right now. Here's the Artemis II. This is going to be a video in a second, but I'm going to talk about it for a little bit. Give you a little bit of stuff over there in the corner. You can see it launched April 1st of this year. An amazing, amazing thing that I was able to go down there. My wife and I went down there and saw it. It still gives me goosebumps to this day. That's the first test that I saw that close, or not test, first launch that I saw that close. And I was far enough away to kind of think about it. I'm watching this rocket launch, and it's just an amazing view. And about 20, 25 seconds after that is when the sound wave hits you. And the clothes are shaking on your body. And your soul is just like, oh, it's an amazing thing. I was escorting visitors and such, and I had a bus driver who didn't live in the area, came down, and he was like, why are these people so excited? It's just like fireworks. I've seen fireworks before. And I went, not like this. And so and I told him, I said, look for me. I'll get you when there's about 5 minutes left before the launch, and you're standing next to me, because I want to see how you react when this happens. And him, like myself, had tears in his eyes after he watched that thing, because it was an amazing, amazing thing. So, that is my hint to you, if you get the opportunity, and she will share the same hint of if you can get down there and do it and see one, because it will change your life. So they were up there 9 days, 1 hour, and 32 minutes. It was an amazing thing. They went further into space than any humans have ever gone and come back from. That is just the thought of that is something that I just can't imagine. The people that they broke, the record that they broke, are the people that are on that medal right there, Apollo 13. And that was something that they had to do. That wasn't something that they wanted to do. It was something that they had to do to be able to use the moon to be able to get back, the gravity of the moon to pull them back to the Earth, and, without landing. So, that is something of an engineering feat, again. Now, people will ask, and this is just something that I'll add to this whole conversation of why haven't we gotten back? So 1972, December 1972, is the last time we had feet on the moon. Why has it taken so long to get back? Why is it, well, one, we kind of lost interest in the 70s. People were, hey, we're up there again, really? And so they kind of stopped. So there's a lot of interest that was lost. You can imagine 4.5% of the national budget going to NASA. That's not really tenable in the fact of you can't do that for that long. And so that had to start coming down. That actually started waning in about 1966 is when that started coming back down to a lower level. And so the things just changed. And if you remember the political climate at the time, Vietnam was going on, there was a lot of other things that were happening. So resources shifted. Now we're going back because we want to get to Mars. Well, it's smart to go back there and be able to test how to build habitats and those types of things on some place that you can get to in 3 days instead of 6 months. So if something happens, and if you've seen The Martian with Matt Damon getting lost up there, you remember it took him a year to get back to him. Okay, so if there's something that you want to learn and do it close to home so that you can prove it before you go and do the hard, really, really hard thing. Because it's going to be hard on the moon. Don't think that it's easy. But we're going back, and when we go back this time, if you remember, they were in the Sea of Tranquility. They were doing other things, but they were landing around the equator of the moon. So when they go and when they do their orbits around the moon, it's just a straight shot, and then you start orbiting around the moon. Now we are going to land on the south pole of the moon, because we know that there's water there. There's ice water there, or ice there, and we can make water out of it. So that's where we want to go, and we'll be able to build habitats there. But to be able to go from this to this is difficult. Yes, sir.
Hey, you know what you said, it's like, when they go around the moon, like, how's it like, is it like south, like the other side of the moon got water on it, or like the center of the moon?
So down in the craters of the moon, on the south pole, and they think up on the north pole, that there's ice in those craters, that they can make water, well, they can melt to make water out of. And water is the building block of life. And that, like I was telling you before, we use that as our fuels, hydrogen and oxygen. We can break it apart, and then we have our fuel to be able to go further or do anything else we want to do.
So we do end up going to Mars, right? How long do you think it would take us to get back?
Well, so again, when you start bringing orbital mechanics in and those types of things, it can take 6 months to a year to get back. It's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot of food, a lot of water, a lot of logistics.
But you know, on the news, they did say we was trying to figure out how to get to Mars and get back to Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're trying. The hard stuff is coming.
Really trying to do that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We're trying to get there, hopefully in my lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. All right, let me show you a video real quick. Oh, it didn't do it. Oh, did it again?
Oh, you was playing in the background.
It was playing a video in the background? Oh, it played it? Oh, it sure did. Look at that. Wow, okay. Y'all missed it. I did. All right, I have another video. 65 years and 65 seconds. And I'm going to be quiet because it's got sound to it.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
Good part to start.
And lift off the crew of Artemis 2, now bound for the moon.
That's really cool. That's the first time I've seen that. All right. So to kind of give you a couple of more things, come visit us. Visit us on our webpage right there. You can see the webpage. You can go out there and you can see the 65 years of Stennis. This is all of y'all. So visit you. Visit your stuff. Go visit this state. You can see us on all the different social medias. They took out a couple of slides on this, but so just I'll give you a couple of things. They took a slide out on me, and it was the economic impact. The economic impact of NASA and Stennis Space Center in the region. So if you can take and you look and you put a dot at Stennis Space Center, you draw out a 50-mile radius around there, you hit into St. Tammany Parish, you hit into Pearl River County, Hancock County, and
Harrison County.
Harrison, thank you. I'm just losing my mouth right now. Harrison County, you draw that all out, there's $1 billion impact by Stennis Space Center out there. It's a great place to be. Any space company that you hear the name of at this point has been at Stennis Space Center to test. If they have problems, they come see us. And so, again, this is y'all's asset, this is the nation's asset. Stennis Space Center is a great thing for the past 65 years. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Anything y'all want to see or talk about? Let's go.
All right, we'll have to give them another round of applause, please. And if you need to have the mic, we'll have questions right now, and so here.
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry?
Repeat the questions.
She's handing the mic out, so hopefully you'll all be able to hear it.
So I just wanted to know, let me go ahead. I probably don't need it all, honestly. You're clearly very passionate about space, and I'm just really curious about where that passion comes from. Like, did you have that as a kid, or like, was it like something as a young adult? Like, I'm just really curious about that personally in terms of your own passion with space and NASA, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I, and my wife is in the room, and one of my interns is actually in the room, and he surprised me to come here today. But, so I'm a true geek at heart, and so I kind of grew up just in geek land. And so, yeah, absolutely has always been something. When I got out to Stennis, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story, is that I started at Stennis Space Center on May 1st, 2000. I started with the contractor, and I've been working for NASA for right at 20 years. I was working as a contractor for NASA. The first day that I was out at Stennis Space Center, I got to watch an engine test.
You got to watch what?
An engine test.
Oh,
So I was checking in, you process into any job. And when it got into the afternoon, and one of the guys I had just met, he's like, "Hey, you want to go see an engine test?" And I was like, "Do I need oxygen to breathe?" Yeah. So I was like, "Let's go." And then we jumped in a truck. We drove out on the fence line. If you take and you look, it was right here. It was right along this fence. There's a fence line right here. And so we drove up, pulled the truck up, and almost ran into the fence. And we sat there and we watched it on that stand right there. And it changed my life.
Do y'all offer public tours of Stennis, or can anybody in the public ever go see a test?
So we used to, and so I will give a plug for our Science Center, which is the Infinity Science Center. It's right on I-10. It's on the first exit on I-10 into Mississippi from Louisiana. The Infinity Science Center we used to have buses that would run onto the site. Used to. Now, occasionally, not very often, we do public test firings. We haven't done one in a while, but I had heard that we were going to be doing one soon. You know how that rumor mill goes. And so I can remember, and my wife could share this with you, we went to one of the first public test firings that they did. The logistics, they invited people from the hotels and motels and everything from the area, and they were thinking, oh, we're just going to get a few hundred people. There was over 5,000 people who showed up. We did not have the buses for that. we sat in a field, as this is, way over here, and did not watch the engine test fire because we were getting eaten up by mosquitoes. We left. So we did not even see it. But we have gotten better at that. It's not, when we do invite the public in, we kind of limit and then make it. But there has been talk about we're going to do that again. Yes, ma'am.
Does SpaceX do their own testing?
SpaceX does their own testing. They do their testing down in Boca Chica, Texas, which is in the southern tip of Texas. They came, when they were developing their engines, they did some component engine testing at our facility. They came through when they've had some engine test problems and they need to get to higher pressures and such, they come through our facility. But they do their own engine testing. And that was one of the things. So to kind of tell you a little bit of that history inside of that is that, you know, so if you follow SpaceX and the timing of when they came through, they were starting to ramp up in the early 2000s. You get to those mid-2010 areas when they're really starting to get big. We were busier than all get out at that time. We didn't have room for them. They probably, if we had room, they probably would be there with us, but we just didn't have room. We had to tell them, sorry, we just don't have it. Well, if you've ever read or know anything about Elon, he doesn't wait for anything. So he went, he built his own stuff. And so that's why they test over there. Yes, ma'am?
I have two questions. The Infinity Science Center that Nan mentioned, are you able to see the test stands from it?
No. So back in the 60s from that spot you could, because they cut all the trees down. But all the trees grew back. And so, no, you can't see them from there. There are videos and different things of engine tests in there, but you can watch that on YouTube if you're really interested in seeing that, but it absolutely does not do it justice from what a real engine test feels like.
And my second question is, how is all this going to help us with going to Mars someday?
So those engines are tested right there. So we are the National Propulsion Test Center for NASA. Okay, so we test all the big engines for NASA. And so that's what's going to happen right there.
So is it safe to say you can't get to Mars without going to Mississippi?
That is a true statement. And that is an actual statement that Werner von Braun said about the moon. You cannot get to the moon without going through South Mississippi. That was and you must have read that somewhere and it just stuck in your head. But no, that's Werner. And if you don't know, and I didn't talk, I said his name once before, but Werner von Braun is the father of the space.
Rocket.
Well, not necessarily rockets. That's Goddard, but he was the one who built all this idea going to the moon and being able to get there and built all this. And he was the first center director at Marshall Space Flight Center, and he just really, really smart, crazy smart guy.
I got a question. What would happen if, like, even if you're astronauts, what would happen if you step foot into Mars, like how bad it is?
You're talking about how? You're talking, like if we stepped it like this?
No, like, even
or if you were in a suit.
If you were in a suit, like.
So that's one of the things. And so, and if you take and you go back and you look at when they landed on the moon, we didn't know what to expect. So there was a lot of people that were like, okay, when we land on the moon, is it going to create a big dust cloud and now we're going to be covered in dust?
Right.
Or when they land, what's the regular, and that's what they call the dust on the moon, what is it going to be? And if you've ever felt that, it's very sharp. Okay? And it can cut the suits up.
Or is it like painful a lot, or?
No, well, they were in their suits, but it cut. You can see little cuts on the suits and everything because when you take and you look at like the sand and everything here on Earth, there's wind and there's water and there's all the different things that help wear that down and make it smooth. There's nothing like that on the moon, so it all stays sharp. And so we were worried, and then when those guys came back, they were in quarantine for a while to make sure that they didn't bring back space germs. So there's a lot of smart people that think about that, and that's why we have all of those probes and everything on Mars. We're hoping to get a Mars return, that we get some stuff back from Mars, that we can go, okay, this is what Mars is, but we have the cameras and the drills going into Mars right now and checking all that stuff out so that we're prepared for those types of things when we get there.
Right, and also, like, has anyone else besides them, have they stepped to other planets, or is it just them?
We've just been on the moon, and it's only the United States that's been on the moon, with humans. So.
But How do the astronauts get ready for the training, before they get on the moon, before they get launched to the moon?
With the training?
The training, like, how do they get the training?
So they do most of that in Houston. And so they have a bunch of different things that they train them with. They get them used to being in no gravity by taking the airplane and going up and down. And when you're going down, it acts like you're weightless. So they can get used to kind of being in no gravity. But when they're on the space station right now, when they're training for that and being able to go do spacewalks, they actually do it in a swimming pool. And so they have a suit that acts like a scuba suit, that's their space suit, and they pressurize the suit. And then they go and they do all the stuff in a swimming pool because you almost feel like you're weightless when you're in the water, right? And so they do some of that, and they learn how to move. Well, it's 1/6 the Earth, so it's only just a fraction of the gravity. And if you watch some of the pictures, that's why they kind of bounce around the way that they do. Is one, the suit makes it hard for them to just walk, and two, when it's not like being on Earth where you're stuck to the Earth. You can move a little bit better when they bounce. So
it's a difference.
It's definitely a difference. It's like being on a spacewalk, a jump rope. It's kind of the same thing. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
The Chinese
Yes.
are investing a lot in robotics
Yes.
to go to the moon.
And they're investing for their people to go too. Yes.
Yes. And would you like to expand on that?
So we can definitely talk about that. So one of the things, if you take and you look at this, so if you looked, Artemis, this is Artemis. There's a thing called the Artemis Accords, and that's something that NASA started, and we have 120 countries or something ridiculous that have already signed the Artemis Accords. And basically what it is that, hey, this is what we're going to do when we get into space. It's kind of agreeing to all these different things. Back in the 60s, every country on Earth had signed a peace agreement saying that the moon is free. Nobody owns it. And so they, being the Chinese, are looking to get there to be able to do similar things that we want to do, of being able to inhabit the moon, build on it, so that they could potentially beat us to Mars, is the idea. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. And I can't tell you that, because we just hope that they agree to do what they said that they were going to do. And that it be a peaceful thing, and that science is for everybody. But we'll see. And I'm not going to be here to say that they're not, but that's kind of where we are right now. And see how that goes, but yeah.
So, yes, I was going to ask, well, first let me say I love space. I grew up in Fort Mississippi. I heard all the rocket tests when I was a kid. I got to walk up at the testing when it had a first stage loaded in it. I took my own self-guided tour at Launch Complex 33 at White Sands Missile Range, where Vaughn Braun did all the VU stuff, then inside the VAV, all those things. But I haven't heard you talk about how Stennis supports U.S. Navy SEALs, which these people may or may not be interested in.
You are a very good segue, so thank you. So again, we talk about the Navy came on site. There's 5 different segments of the Navy on site now. There's over 50 different federal lieutenants that are on site. And so what he's talking about is there's a group down there that's called Special Boat Team 22. They do riverine warfare. And the riverine warfare is anywhere there's a river, these are the guys that would go and do it. And so, like he said with the SEALs and such, they come through, and if they need to train or figure out how to do an incursion on the river, that's where they do it. They do it down there. And so we are very much engaged in making sure our warfighters are trained properly and in any way that we can. Like I told you before, we have a lot of land. The west side of that area is owned by the Navy. So outside of our borders into the the buffer zone area that I was talking about is owned by the Navy, and they do live fire exercises there. And it's right on the Pearl River, so they can use it as river. They have things built all up in there that they can go do lots of training. So, and I am very thankful that that's there, because they are able to get trained and do the things that they need to do. So, yes.
How do y'all do y'all rocket testing? Like testing a rocket before it launch? Like how do y'all test y'all rocket? Do it run by gas, or how do it run? Like how y'all test y'all rocket?
So let's look at this model right here, okay? And so we test in the engine, and that's what we do. We do static engine testing. If you take and you look at that, you can see two tanks on there. The smaller tank is oxygen, and the larger tank is hydrogen. So the engine is affixed underneath it, because we don't want it to go anywhere. And the joke at Stennis is that if the test director says we have liftoff, it's a bad day. That's what they do over in Florida. We don't do that in Mississippi. Okay? So we take and we attach it into the test stand, and then those tanks, like you were saying, where's the gas? We actually, those are liquids, and when we take and start looking, so like I was joking earlier saying more than I want oxygen. Oxygen's all around us, and about 21%. Then you have nitrogen, and you got helium, you got all kinds of different gases that are around you. If you take and you make those gases super cold, they will turn into liquid. Like liquid oxygen, minus 289 degrees. Minus 289 degrees. Liquid hydrogen, minus 420 degrees. Okay, very, very cold. Like when it touches you, it burns you because it's so cold. Okay, and so those liquids are used, and the idea of using liquids is that now if I turn it into gas, it expands over 50 times bigger than what it is. It's easier to carry liquids than it is to carry that much gas. And to be able to carry that much gas, you have super high pressure, and it's not feasible to do. That's why we use the liquids. And so that's how they test the engines. We were talking about the canal systems before, and and those are used to move bigger tanks around that carry those liquids. And those liquids are moved through the canal system, they're attached up to the stand. That's why we can't have tides, and so that we stay at one constant level so that the barge doesn't go down and up and pull the hose that connects it to the stand.
So when y'all test the rocket, so how y'all know 100% of the time when y'all come back from the space center? Like, how y'all test that out? Like,
well, that's why we're testing it, so that we know that we can do that. And so so there's a saying in NASA, you fly as you test and you test as you fly, meaning that the engine that we set up going, it takes about 8.5 minutes from ground to space. We tested that long on there at a higher power level than what they will use, just so that we know it won't fail. And then again, we were talking about orbital mechanics and those types of things earlier. All that comes into play on how you get them back. And they have a certain entry point and different things like that. So there's a lot of, so great movie is Hidden Figures. And if you've ever watched that movie, they have a chalkboard that's as tall as, it's 20 foot tall. And they're up on a ladder doing it. Well, this lady's doing math calculations on what needs to be done. That's all that stuff that makes that happen. Now, it's not a lady up on a chalkboard anymore. They have nice little computers, but same thing. Technology. That's what it is. And that is, and for the people in that was not Hollywood when they talk about John Glenn saying, I want her to do the calculations. That was 100% the truth. So just to kind of verify that fact for you, they did not play that up. They didn't need to.
So when you say math calculations, we're talking about like advanced geometry, trigonometry, calculus?
Things, yes. Just yes. It's all of it. All of the above.
A quick question. On Apollo 11, the launch vehicle only used engines. But like on the space shuttle, it used a combination of engines as well as rockets, the SRBs. So do you guys do any testing for SRBs, or do you test just engines?
The SRBs are tested in Utah. Promontory Point, Utah, and they shoot it into the side of a mountain. But but we do not do any SRB testing. So one of the things that they say about the SRB testing, because of the types of, so to give you an idea, the SRB, a solid rocket booster, it is a solid fuel, and the fuel has a mixture of aluminums and other things in it. We at one point we're talking about doing it down there, but the ecological impact was too great. So we don't. Look, I have one right here, and I'll come right to you.
I was just curious about the whole, like, I'm not from Mississippi, and so when I think about NASA, I think of Houston, I think of Florida. I was even aware of Huntsville as a kid, but not Stennis, and I'm curious if like there is kind of like a rivalry within NASA, or, you know, in terms of like the renown of Stennis versus the other places.
So to me, there's no rivalry. Stennis is the best, okay? So, and I have proof to back that up in the fact of, and I'll kind of walk through some things. So every year, and you may or may not hear this, but inside of government, they go and they do surveys. And if you do surveys as your job, God bless you. We do more surveys than you know what to do with. But we have a survey that's done every year. I can't remember the group that does it, but they are measuring government to find out how happy workers are. NASA has been the best place to work in government for the past 15 years. So then they go down a little bit further and they dig down into the details a little bit more. Stennis is the best place to work in NASA. Okay, so that just proves it to me. So, but nothing more than that. But so yes, so just so that y'all know, Stennis is the best kept secret in Mississippi. Okay. It is a huge economic engine. It is, you can, just like he said earlier, you cannot get to the moon, you can't get to Mars without going through South Mississippi. Okay, so again, it's a best kept secret in NASA. But there are 10 centers, and I probably should have went through that. So there's 10 NASA centers, including headquarters in DC. They're all over the country. There's 2 in California, there's 1 in Virginia, there's, you got them in Maryland. There used to be segments in New York, but that one got shut down during the Doge. White Sands was mentioned, that's in New Mexico. And there's Glenn up in Cleveland, there's Langley's in Virginia, and Goddard's in Maryland. But there's centers all over, and each one of them do something different. And so when you take and you look at, so Stennis Space Center, Johnson Space Center. So when you're talking, you go to one of the research centers, you go to Glenn Research Center. And so they do a little bit different. And so let's talk a little bit about NASA in itself. So you have NASA, NASA. That first A gets ignored a little bit. That's aeronautics. So, and this isn't something that Stennis does, but it's something that NASA does. And the fact that if you've flown on a plane recently, you probably look out at the wings and you see what's called a winglet. It's that little turn up on the end of the wing. You know what that's there for?
It actually vents, it keeps air over the airfoil and improves gas mileage.
There you go. There it is, right there. You know how much? That little winglet. You know how much it improves the gas mileage? 20%. By putting that little thing, just like he said, keeps the air over the airfoil and keeps you going forward. If you didn't have that, you'd form little eddy currents on the end, it pulls the plane backwards. They developed that, yes.
All right, guys, I know we're all geeking out. The gallery talk is over. We do have some different merch, different postcards, pins, stickers, and tattoos that Mr. Rich has brought us. In October, we'll have another gallery talk on entertainment. So we want you guys to come to that. That is on October 15th, and that'll be at 11 a.m. as well. And you can also ask him more questions. I'm pretty sure he wants all the questions.
Come on up.
I'm good for asking another question. But thank you guys for coming, and you guys can visit the rest of the exhibit, all right?
Thank you.